Let's go, Mr. Driver. Wrong game. Outrun Europa is a 1991 game from US Gold. You won't recognise it from the arcades because there is no arcade version. It's a US Gold game, first touted in 1988, but kind of got waylaid because Sega came out with Turbo Outrun. Turbo Outrun came out and then this came out. Starting off on the C64, there's a plot where you are chasing some documents and things across Europe. It really doesn't matter. It's a racing game, right? You're going to be in your red Ferrari and racing across Europe. Right? C64 version has a rather funky soundtrack. Not quite as good as the Turbo Outrun music, but still pretty good. Here's the plot. Just a little longer and the owner of that bike will go inside. Just what I need to catch the thieves who have stolen my car. The agency would have heard of this by now and the retirement orders would have been sent out. Soon every agent in Europe will be on my trail. Plot really doesn't matter, so where's your car? Outrun Europa is a multi-vehicle game. You have the police chasing you. You also have other agents chasing you. And there's the police. You start off in the UK and then we're going to race across various countries. That looks like an XR3i, well, at least an Escort. That's an XR3i, isn't it? Time's up. I've already run out of time. Spectrum version. All these games are by Probe. And on the specky here, I think there's supposed to be music, but I'm getting 48k. Yet again, it's a repeat of some of the other games I've had. So the graphics are looking rather blocky and, well, it's very skittish, to say the least. And if you bought this game on the Spectrum, you'd be a little bit surprised because if you'd read the review in Your Sinclair by James Leach, you will have seen the screenshots had colour, and yet you've got a black and white version. How odd. Well, a couple of years ago, somebody found that the colour version does exist in the game. And I'm showing a later level now, but you poke the game and suddenly the colour comes to life. And you can see why it's been left out of the game. Still looks nothing like those Your Sinclair screenshots, does it? But if you do want to play the game in colour without horrific graphics, then some people have kindly tidied it all up. It actually looks much better. You can see it here. This is level 1. It's still incredibly skittish, but you do get the colour. But we'll be returning to the standard Spectrum version in a bit because we're going over to the Amstrad CPC. Take note of the music. It's particularly bad, so it'll be interesting to see what the ST gets, right? It's really out of tune. Anyway, you get this usual thing about you found a bike. And it's very similar to the Spectrum version, but with colour. And you can see how everything seems to be made up of blocks. Presumably because, well, Probe liked to do this thing, didn't they? Where they had an engine and they would just reuse it. And they had it was an engine that handled graphics and they could do it very, very easily. Made the games quick to convert, but you end up with this. I mean, you can't really see it, but if you pause the game, you can see just how everything's kind of solid black, even with the bushes. Everything's got green blocks around it in a way the CPC doesn't need to do. And this is because of the way all this has been done. It's a quick graphical system that can shove the graphics between the Spectrum and Amstrad without kind of having to spend a lot of effort on it. There's the police. Oh yes, you have a turbo as well. Even though this isn't Turbo Outrun, you have turbos available, which you collect. So here we are on the Master System. And I'm playing this on my Mega Drive via a flash cart, so it isn't a real Master System running this. I'm only going to show this briefly. But I did want to show you that there is a Master System version because there's interesting things about it. So off we go, and it's got this blocky look again from the Spectrum and Amstrad. It's much faster, but everything still really shoots past and you can't see it, again, unless you pause the game, but there's massive blocks around the objects at the side of the course. And look, see how those bushes, again, are made up of blocks. And it's just too, I mean, look how fast stuff goes on the side of the road. And just how it's got that skittish thing that the Spectrum and Amstrad version has. And people try and shove you off the road, then you have to try and shove them off the road. It's almost like a proto Road Rash, but nowhere near as good. Only get a shield on the Master System version because presumably Sega said this is a bit too hard. Yes, it's not a classic, is it? Over to the ST. Now remember what I said about that Amstrad soundtrack? Why doesn't the Amstrad have this? Bizarre. Why not? Why? Why does the Amstrad have that tuneless rubbish when the ST's got a perfectly serviceable soundtrack that just go onto the 8 bits? No idea. So it's a bit of a jump up here on the ST. I mean, this is 1991, so it does feel a little bit old. But at least the bike isn't incredibly skittish, and while these objects at the side of the road whiz past, it's more controllable, and it's easier to pick up the canisters I've crashed, the canisters on the road that you need to pick up to boost up your turbo. Although, given the draw distance and speeds, you really don't get much warning. Amiga version. So we should get a nice Matt Furniss soundtrack this time. Oh yeah, here we go. That's a classic Furniss right there. Manchester United Europe and all that. Samples sound a little bit crunchy. I don't know why. Well, presumably the samples are crunchy. And it's like the ST, basic as you'd expect for this era. Matt Belby in Amiga Power did say, by the standards of 1991, this game on the Amiga does come across as a bit lacking. And yes, I mean, it is 1991, so you'd be expecting a little bit more from this. And there's the enemy agents in their Porsche. And they get in front of you and try and slow you down. Of course, the other game that we get chased by the police is Crazy Cars, which came out, 89, I'm going to say. But you get to the end of the level, and look, it's all changed, because you go with Roger Moore in The Spy Who Loved Me and jump on a jet ski. And now you have to cross the channel to France. And it's quite busy. There's lots of boats and things around, and people trying to knock you out. Oh! It's Barracuda from Howard's Way. And then the police come down and drop bombs on you. Back to the 64, and we're heading towards Dover. The game screams, caution, I've been arrested. Game over. But don't worry, we've got to cheat. Damn, they've boarded a ferry. If I lose them, that'll be it. I've got to find a way of following them. Ah, this jet ski should do the trick. So this is crossing the channel on the C64. And like the Amiga, it's quite a busy stretch. It's quite a bit of busy stretch of water in real life. But I don't think you have rocks and logs and lighthouses and buoys all the way across. On the Spectrum, it's interesting. You can barely see anything. Presumably the crossing is at night as things jerk towards you. It's got 83%. It's amazing that Wikipedia actually references your Sinclair review as being the definitive review, given they clearly didn't review the actual game. 83%. So, the Amstrad version isn't at night, unlike the Spectrum. The sea is depicted by flashing the colours of some graphics to get movement as you jerk across the waves. Here comes a helicopter to bomb me as I cross the channel. Oh dear, don't give Priti Patel any ideas. Back on the ST and we head towards, I'm assuming, Calais. Could be Dieppe, who knows? Boulogne. And there we go. We get up off the jet ski and jump into a waiting car. And here we go. It's France because I'm waiting for something that makes it stereotypically France. Cafes outside. Very thin buildings. Ah, 2CV. Is that 2CV? I think it was. But at least we're finally on level 3 in a car! I mean, an Outrun go. That's a Renault. That's a Renault. It's a Renault. Renault 5. Who just owns an Outrun game where you only get into a car on level 3? On the Amiga, and this is my 1200, so it's probably running faster. The car has nowhere near the handling of... Oh, they're in a Renault 5 as well. Presuming that's a Renault 5 Turbo. Speaking of turbos, they are rationed, but I think I mentioned you can pick up barrels that will give you more turbos. On the 64, the turbo works differently. You hold down the fire button for however long you want the boost. On the other versions, it works more like turbos and Chase HQ. You press the fire button, one of your however many turbos you get is set off and it works for a predetermined amount of time. But be careful where you activate it because it's very easy to end up piling your car into a corner. So here we are in France on the C64. That's a 2CV, definitely. Yes, there's the Eiffel Tower in the background there, because clearly... Why are there giant wine bottles by the side of the road? Are they signs? They're going past too fast to see. Are they giant bottles that... I don't know. The car does feel a little bit like it's on ice on the 64, but after you've been playing the other, well, the Spectrum version, here we are here in our monochrome hell. James Leach, 83%. What were you thinking? You were shown this mess and they told you, don't worry, James, it's going to be in colour. That still doesn't excuse the horrible jerking graphics, the nasty controls. Ugh. Anyway, here we are on the ST, and we've come to the end of the France level. I notice the time I am cheating, so over to Spain. The man at the cafe suggested the driver of my Ferrari was heading across the Spanish border. Oh, perhaps they've stolen your Ferrari. Perhaps that's the plot. Perhaps I should have read the instructions. It's an outrun game. I shouldn't need to read the instructions. I should just be racing my big, red, fast sports car. It's outrun. That's what you do in outrun. Oh no, too late again. The car is in that cargo ship and oh goodness me, there's going to be another sea level. Goody goody. This time we're in a boat. Like Ken Masters in his speedboat. Here we go then. Looking at the scores for this C64 version, Zap gave this 94%, Commodore format 87%. The thing that keeps coming back to me when I race along on this Outrun cash-in game is it's just US Gold again, rubbing the good name of Outrun into the dirt. And you think of games like Lotus on the 8-bits or the 16-bits, and that's far more of an Outrun feeling than anything US Gold ever put out with the official Outrun branding on it, being the Spectrum version of Lotus or the Amiga version, which really gets that Outrun arcade feel. For US Gold, this isn't about producing a good game. This is about grinding more value out of that Outrun license they've got. Here we are on the Amiga on the same thing, going through an exceptionally busy bit of sea with rocks and buoys and boats sailing across, and eventually we arrive in Genoa. And look, we're finally in a red car. Well, now it actually still feels more like Crazy Cars 2. Of course, now I'm in a Ferrari, the roads are really, really twisty and frustrating. And I'm not sure which way I'm supposed to go when the road splits off. Because the earlier levels, didn't they have arrows pointing which way to go, and now I don't. Here we are on the Amstrad. Look at this mess. Look at this atrocious, appalling, juddering mess. With big, blocky graphics designed so they can be ported easily to the Spectrum in 8x8 blocks. Except they couldn't even get that right because it all ended up in monochrome. So I've set my turbo off and I'm just kind of hurtling off into the distance. Here come the police again. Who incidentally can pretty much always drive as fast as you anyway unless you set off your turbo. And here we are on the Amiga. End of the game. Yes, we've caught up with the criminals in my car and we point a gun at them. And that's it all over. How can you mess up Outrun? Well, US Gold have managed it yet again. The only version here that really comes out with any credit is the C64 version. I said it when I reviewed Turbo Outrun on that system. The C64 isn't exactly a wash with decent racing games, so it's nice to see one that's competently done. It is not as good as Turbo Outrun or Power Drift. Come to that. And although the time limits are incredibly tight, you can have some fun with it. Which is more than I can say for the Spectrum and CPC versions. The CPC version at least has some colour in it, and the Spectrum version, Oh my goodness me. What an appalling, abominable, jerky, ugly, no fun at all mess. That review in Your Sinclair is downright dishonest. They may have intended the game to look like that, but even when you come to play the improved version done a couple of years ago with all the graphics patched and properly done, it's still no fun. SC and Amiga versions, well, they feel like old games for the time. If we took away the Outrun name, you'd be going, well, why'd I be even buying this? That Master System version is what the Spectrum and Amstrad versions could have been if more effort had been put into them, but it still falls way below what you'd expect for a cartridge game costing that money. And blocky 8x8 graphics like that on the Master System, come on Probe, it's like a sausage machine, your graphics engine. You just churn anything through and end up with that tripe out the other end. Outrun Europa is a game on all of these systems that trades off the good name of the Outrun brand. Frankly, a name that US Gold were allowed to drive harder and harder into the dirt. If you're going to go and play Outrun on any of the 8-bits, then go and play Turbo Outrun on the C64 instead. On the 16-bits, you've got so many better racing games to play than this old tripe. Lotus is out by now, and frankly, car aside, that's way more of an Outrun game than this.